Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. My older brother, Ryan, has always been the star of the family. He's the classic overachiever. Straight A's in school, a successful career as a doctor, and always the one our parents bragged about at family gatherings. Meanwhile, I've always been the more normal sibling. Steady job, no kids, no grand accolades, but I've been content with my life. Ryan met Sarah about a decade ago. She was incredible, smart, kind, and loving. She worked as a teacher and was fiercely dedicated to her students. They got married, had two beautiful kids, Mia 7 and Ethan 5, and for a while everything seemed perfect. Sarah and I quickly became close. Since I don't have kids of my own, Mia and Ethan filled a space in my heart I didn't even know was empty. Sarah would often joke that I was more like their second mom than their aunt because I was always around to help with babysitting or planning fun activities. She'd confide in me about how exhausting it was balancing Ryan's demanding career, the kids, and her own job. But she loved her family and worked hard to keep everything together. But while Sarah was pouring her heart into the family, Ryan had other plans. About a year and a half ago, Sarah called me in tears. She had just discovered that Ryan was having an affair with one of the nurses at his clinic, Claire. Claire is in her late 20s, single, and without sounding too judgmental, she's not exactly known for her professionalism or maturity. She's the type of person who posts thirst traps on Instagram and captions them with Bible quotes. At first, Ryan denied everything. He gaslit Sarah, saying she was imagining things and that her suspicions were just paranoia. But Sarah isn't stupid. She found messages on his phone, explicit ones, that left no doubt about what was going on. When she confronted him with the evidence, Ryan finally admitted it. But instead of apologizing or trying to fix things, he dropped another bombshell. He was in love with Claire and wanted a divorce. Sarah was devastated. She begged him to think about the kids, to try counseling, anything. But Ryan was already halfway out the door. Within weeks, he had moved in with Claire, leaving Sarah to deal with the fallout. The divorce was ugly. Ryan fought tooth and nail to minimize child support, claiming that his new family needed the money more. Sarah, being the strong woman she is, didn't let him walk all over her, but it was still an exhausting process. She ended up with primary custody of the kids, while Ryan got every other weekend and alternating holidays. During this time, my bond with Sarah and the kids only grew stronger. I helped Sarah navigate the legal mess, babysat Mia and Ethan whenever she needed a break, and made sure the kids knew they were loved despite everything going on. I can't tell you how many nights I spent comforting Mia when she asked why her dad didn't live with them anymore, or trying to explain to Ethan why Daddy didn't come to his soccer games. Meanwhile, Ryan and Claire's relationship blossomed. They got married about 6 months ago, and now Claire is pregnant. Ryan is over the moon about his fresh start, but his involvement with Mia and Ethan has been half-hearted at best. He'll show up for his scheduled weekends, but he doesn't go out of his way to be there for them. It breaks my heart because those kids adore him, even after everything. Claire has made it clear that she sees Sarah as a threat. She constantly refers to her as the ex in a dismissive tone, as if Sarah didn't spend years building a life with Ryan and raising his kids. Claire has also been trying to erase Sarah from the family picture. She's pushed Ryan to ask our parents to stop inviting Sarah to family events, and she's made it known that she doesn't want Mia or Ethan talking about their mom when they're at her house. To top it off, Claire thrives on drama. She's one of those people who can't let a single slight go without making it into a full-blown issue. If someone doesn't cater to her every whim, she cries about how she's being disrespected. And now that she's pregnant, she's using it as a weapon to demand even more attention and special treatment. This year, I decided to host Christmas at my house. It's the first time I've hosted, and I wanted it to be special, especially for Mia and Ethan, who deserve some holiday joy after such a rough year. Naturally, I invited Sarah. She and the kids are family to me, and there was no way I was leaving them out. When Ryan found out that Sarah was coming, he called me in a rage. He said it was inappropriate for me to invite his ex-wife to a family event now that he's remarried. Claire, who was apparently listening in on the call, chimed in to say that seeing Sarah would be too stressful for her and that it could harm her pregnancy. Ryan demanded that I disinvite Sarah, saying that Claire is his family now, and that I need to respect that. He even had the audacity to suggest that Sarah isn't really family anymore, and that it was weird for me to stay so close to her. I laughed. I told Ryan that if Claire's pregnancy was so delicate that seeing Sarah could harm her, they were welcome to stay home. But as far as I was concerned, Sarah and the kids were coming to Christmas, and that was non-negotiable. Ryan and Claire are now furious. They've been sending me passive-aggressive texts about how I'm disloyal and playing favorites. Ryan accused me of being stuck in the past and said I need to move on and accept Claire as part of the family. Claire has been milking the situation, telling anyone who will listen that I'm intentionally causing her stress and putting her baby at risk. My parents are trying to stay neutral, but I can tell they're leaning toward Ryan's side. They've suggested that I should uninvite Sarah just to keep the peace, but I refuse to do that. Sarah didn't do anything wrong. She's the one who was betrayed, lied to, and left to raise 2 kids on her own. I'm not going to reward Ryan and Claire's selfishness by excluding her. This isn't just about Christmas. It's about standing up for what's right. Sarah and the kids deserve to feel loved and included, especially after everything they've been through. If Ryan and Claire want to sulk at home, that's their choice, but I'm not going to let them dictate who I can invite into my home. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for refusing to disinvite my brother's ex-wife for Christmas? Should I be prioritizing my brother and his new family? Or am I right to stand by Sarah and the kids? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Wow, OP's brother and his new wife sound like a piece of work. Let me get this straight. He cheated on his wife, destroyed his family, and now expects everyone to just pretend Sarah doesn't exist because it makes Claire uncomfortable? That's ridiculous. Sarah is the mother of his children, and she will always be part of the family because of Mia and Ethan. Good on OP for standing her ground and prioritizing what's right over her brother's selfish demands. Claire's pregnancy doesn't give her a free pass to erase Sarah or dictate how OP hosts her holiday. If they can't handle it, they're free to stay home. OP is creating a loving and inclusive environment for the kids, and that's what really matters. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Everyone sucks here. Hear me out. Your brother is a massive a-hole for what he did to Sarah and the kids, and Claire sounds manipulative and immature. However, inviting both Sarah and Ryan with Claire to the same Christmas gathering was bound to create drama. You must have known this would be a powder keg waiting to explode. You're right to want to support Sarah and the kids, but hosting all of them together feels like stirring the pot. Maybe a compromise, like separate celebrations, or inviting Sarah and the kids to a different day would have been better. That way, you can still support Sarah without putting everyone in an awkward situation. Not the a-hole. Your brother is delusional if he thinks Sarah can just disappear because it makes Claire uncomfortable. The way Claire is acting, demanding that Sarah be excluded from family events, screams insecurity. Maybe she knows what kind of man she married and is afraid he'll cheat on her the same way he cheated on Sarah. And let's not ignore the kids in all of this. For Mia and Ethan, having their mom there is probably the most stabilizing thing about this Christmas. If Ryan and Claire cared about the kids' well-being, they'd suck it up and be civil. But no, they'd rather make it all about themselves. You're doing the right thing, OP. Don't let them push you into enabling their selfishness. Info. I'm leaning toward not the a-hole, but I have some questions. How does Sarah feel about being at the same event as Ryan and Claire? Is she okay with it, or is she just going along with it because you invited her? If she's uncomfortable, it might be worth reconsidering to avoid putting her in a stressful situation. Also, how do Mia and Ethan feel about seeing their dad and Claire? Kids can be pretty perceptive, and if there's any tension, it might affect their holiday experience. At the end of the day, the kids' happiness should be the priority. If everyone can act like adults, great. But if it's going to turn into a battlefield, it might be better to rethink things. Edit. A few people have asked how Sarah feels about attending Christmas with Ryan and Claire, so I wanted to address that. I had a long conversation with Sarah before inviting her because I didn't want to put her in an uncomfortable or painful position. Sarah, being the incredible person she is, said she's willing to set aside her differences for the sake of the kids. She admitted that being in the same room as Claire isn't exactly her idea of a good time. After all, this is the woman who had an affair with her husband and is now trying to erase her from the picture. But Sarah is a strong and selfless person, and her priority is always Mia and Ethan. She said she wants the kids to have a magical Christmas surrounded by family, and if that means swallowing her pride and being cordial to keep the peace, she's willing to do it. I can't even begin to explain how much I admire Sarah's grace in all of this. While Ryan and Claire are making demands and throwing tantrums, Sarah is focusing on what's best for the kids. That's one of the many reasons why I refuse to uninvite her. She's not coming to cause drama. She's coming to create a sense of normalcy and love for her children. Update. Well, things have escalated. After I told my brother and Claire that I refused to uninvite Sarah from Christmas, they called me again, and this time, they flat out threatened me, saying that if I'm taking sides with Sarah, then I'll never meet their child once it's born. Ryan told me I needed to make a choice. Either I fully embrace his new family and cut ties with Sarah, or I'd be cut out of their lives entirely. Claire chimed in, saying it's disrespectful to support his ex-wife, and that they won't tolerate betrayal. So I made my choice. I told them that if they're going to weaponize their unborn child to manipulate me, that says more about them than it ever could about me. Sarah and the kids are family to me, real family, and I'm not turning my back on them just to appease Ryan and Claire's egos. If they want to cut me out of their child's life, that's on them. I won't let them push me into abandoning the people I love and care about. As far as I'm concerned, Mia and Ethan are already like my own niece and nephew, and they deserve an aunt who will stand up for them. It hurts, but I have no regrets about my decision. At the end of the day, I'd rather be true to myself and stand by people who actually value family than give in to toxic ultimatums. I guess time will tell if they follow through on their threats. But for now, I'm looking forward to making this Christmas as magical as possible for Sarah, Mia, and Ethan. They deserve it. Bit of backstory. Mom and Dad divorced when I was about 10 due to his addictions, and my mother and sister and I moved overseas shortly after. A few months later, we were introduced to Amber, female 38, my father's new girlfriend, and they got married a couple of years later. Amber was lovely, but like my father, she had some issues with addictions. As soon as they hit the bottle, they would constantly fight, and this caused a lot of problems for their working and family. Lately, due to my father's addiction, he got extremely ill and died in hospital a couple of weeks ago. My sister, Amber, and I were devastated. My sister and I couldn't even fly to see him off due to the virus restrictions. I received the will a few weeks ago. My mother was smart enough to get him to protect my sister and me after they divorced, which was a smart move because all of his assets, money, and houses, etc., have come to us. This is enough money to pay for my university in full, buy a nice house, pay off loans and debts, as well as now be the joint owner of 3 companies. The trouble started last week when I received a text from my uncle saying that Amber was pissed off that her husband didn't leave her anything. Granted, nobody expected him to die so suddenly. He was her whole world. She moved to his country where she had no job, minimal friends, and left her family completely behind to be with him. She couldn't even work due to the country's working laws. I had a call with my uncle later that night, and he warned me to gear up with a lawyer if necessary. By no means do I intend on leaving her with nothing, but at the same time, I don't think she's owed companies, properties, etc. that have been in my family for generations. My uncle and I made the decision that he, my sister, and I would give her $100K USD out of the company to go back to the UK, start afresh, and some further support if needed. She agreed, but then began hitting the bottle again. I hadn't heard from her over the next few days, but all of a sudden, bam, a legal notice saying she was going to try and get half of the will. I called my aunt, who happens to be a lawyer. She stated that looking at the laws of where he is, his last will is void. But luckily enough, it is void, because everything goes to the children regardless. To say she was pissed was an understatement. I got a call from my uncle that apparently she thinks my mother, who really has nothing to do with this, she's just protecting my sister and me, and the rest of my family are a-holes for cutting her out of the will. I know she loved and cherished that man beyond belief, but someone please tell me, am I the a-hole? Edit. At the time of writing his will, he was single, and from what I found, if you are single with children, the will usually will pass on to them when they become of age. Honestly, not the a-hole. If he loved her so much, why didn't he change the will? You were being generous by offering her that money, but also right to be worried she'll drink it all anyway. If she hadn't sent the legal notice after you offered, I'd have suggested putting the money into a trust, so she'd get an allowance. Not the a-hole. Far from it. You and your sister didn't have to offer her the money, but you both were very generous. I just hope she doesn't drink all this money away, and that she's able to move back home and actually do something with her life. Info. What would your father have wanted? If you feel pretty confident that your father would have wanted her to have something, and you don't arrange it just because technically you don't have to, then yes, you're the a-hole. If you really don't know what he would have wanted, then going by the will is reasonable, and your offer was reasonable. We discussed with my father multiple times before his death about everything he wanted to do, and afterwards my uncle and her talk. We've had family discussions where he has explicitly said he wants all of his estates, and things split evenly amongst his children, and any further children he should have. That means that if he and Amber had a child, it would be split to them as well. My fiancé, 40, and I, 40 male, have been engaged for 11 years and together for 16. A year ago, she gave birth to our daughter. Don't get me wrong, I was excited to have a baby on the way, and I wanted to have kids. My parents were also happy about their first granddaughter. However, after giving birth, my fiancé turned into a neurotic mess of a person, and about 90% of that was due to her body. Her body seemed to have undergone a massive meltdown of sorts, and I certainly wasn't prepared for it. I was fat in middle school, so I have stretch marks, but my wife's pretty much encompassed her whole body. She also would repeat annoying phrases to friends like, "My stomach is squishy, but our daughter loves it because I'm mama," or "I'm perfect in her eyes." In the same breath, she complains that her skin looked like a melted candle, and it's honestly too much to bear for me. She says that she can't imagine trying on wedding gowns, and for the moment I'm just secretly relieved because she's impossible to deal with, and the last thing I want to do is plan a wedding. She's since started spamming everybody's Instagram feed with fitness journey videos. My sister and her college friends came home one weekend and were scrolling through her posts and saying the caption she writes is just desperate, but I've bit my tongue so far. But yesterday, she posted a close-up of her stretch marks with the really secondhand embarrassment-inducing captions to the aspect of, "I'm proud of my tiger stripes." It got a bunch of likes and comments, but honestly, I think people just thought it was the acceptable way to react. The pictures were also pretty close up. I confronted my fiancé and asked if she'd consider taking it down because it's just a set of really unattractive pictures. I honestly had to look away, and I'm sure our friends who follow her might have that gut reaction too. She started a long tirade about how strong her body was and how amazing it was, as if she was the only woman who's ever given birth. I finally stopped her and said it was an embarrassing post and walked away. Am I the a-hole? Now I caught her complaining about giving her best years to me and a bunch of other stuff over text to her friends. The last thing I want to do is plan a wedding. We figured that out when you said you've been engaged for 11 years. Yes, the a-hole. Let's say it's true that she's become a neurotic mess of a person since giving birth. So she's struggling with her mental health, and you're concerned about it only to the extent that you find it embarrassing. You're the a-hole 100%. This woman is showing you her insecurities and worries, and you are basically crapping all over them. Way to go, supportive partner. For what it's worth, my body massively failed me after my second child. So much so I was on a list for hip replacement surgery for 3 years, and towards the end was in excruciating pain constantly, but still had 2 children to care for. Intimacy went out the window. My weight crept up as I couldn't walk, let alone exercise. Do you know what my husband did? He was an absolute rock. He held me when it all got too much, told me it would get better, not once ragged me about my weight, and when I finally had the surgery, he looked after me and the kids for 6 weeks whilst I recovered. That's what a partner does. You should be ducking ashamed of yourself. Grow a pair and be a partner. She's given you a child and it's messed her body up. Make her feel like the queen she is, instead of her having to boost herself on Instagram as you aren't doing it for her. You're the a-hole. Your wife had a baby. Do you not get that bodies go through changes when you're carrying a kid? You're being incredibly unsupportive and gross. Your wife and your daughter deserve better. You can't imagine her trying wedding gowns? I can't imagine her marrying someone like you. Not the a-hole. As a very unattractive woman who has lost weight, I am sympathetic to her. I get it. The stretched marked loose skin is ugly and it sucks to live with. I feel her pain. But torturing yourself won't help. And the thing is, lying to yourself won't help either. I speak from experience when I say that neither of these are good options. She should not be posting pictures of her body or being proud of it. It's not beautiful, and good Lord, no one should be proud of bringing more children into this crap show world. Also, being proud that your uterus carried a baby is like being proud that your colon carried a bunch of poop. That's its ducking job. She will constantly be switching between two extremes of euphoric self-love and devastating self-hate. Neither of those things are healthy. She needs to extricate herself from this mindset completely and focus instead on body neutrality. If she can do that, she will genuinely start to feel better. I, 27 female, and my husband, 28 male, have been together for 10 years and finally got married last week. It was an amazing day as all my family were there and I got to marry my best friend. The day was going well and we were all sat in the dining hall where we had speeches. My dad's speech consisted of childhood memories of me, how much he appreciates my husband, and a few jokes thrown in now and then. It was the perfect speech. It made me and many others tear up. When the meal and speeches were all over, the guests were invited to party on the dance floor, and the doors were open to guests who wanted to wander outside as the venue was a farm. After saying my hellos to all my guests, I found one guest, a family friend, sitting in a dark corner outside bawling her eyes out with her fiancé comforting her. I of course asked her what was wrong, and she mentioned that my dad had said something insensitive in his speech, which I didn't pick up on. Her fiancé said it was the part when he said something along the lines of, "When am I going to have grandchildren?" or "I hope I get grandchildren." I was told that they have been trying to have children for years and been through IVF and had multiple miscarriages. I apologized to her and offered her a hug, but she refused and started screaming at me saying how she wants my dad to apologize instead of me. A few people had heard her, and I felt extremely embarrassed because I was being shouted at. My husband had also heard and came running to me. He eventually told her and her fiancé to leave, as she was causing a scene, and we just wanted to enjoy our wedding night. We offered to get them a taxi, and they left without saying goodbye when the taxi arrived. Here's where I think I'm the a-hole. The next day, I made sure the lady was okay, and also asked why she started screaming in my face. She replied and said that we were insensitive. We didn't consider checking my dad's speech. We were also not sympathetic at all to her when we were speaking to her, and told them to go home. I was shocked, and also a bit hurt because I did comfort her, but she refused it and started screaming at me. I explained to her that my dad's speech was from the heart, so I couldn't pre-check it, and if she had a problem with my dad, then she had a problem with me. I also said that she should have spoken to me about it in private, instead of causing a scene because we didn't want any drama at our wedding, and that she was wrong to scream in my face about it. She then called me an a-hole, and now I'm not invited to her wedding. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Your dad said nothing wrong, and he doesn't have to check his speech with your wedding guests. This person behaved totally inappropriately. Yes, obviously shouting and disrupting the event is good reason to be asked to leave. You're not the a-hole. As tragic as their experience is, they should have just left the wedding if the speech, which clearly unintentionally, upset them that much. I feel like that woman wanted to create that scene for the attention, and to spite your happy moment. She wanted to make your day about her. I'm not saying she's definitely a narcissist or anything. Grief will make you act in messed up ways. Like, seriously, how are you supposed to pre-check a speech for something insensitive when they tell you why it would be insensitive to them after it was said? Not the a-hole. She was not your sister-in-law, so the mention of grandchildren, while it might have forced her to remember something unpleasant, was not about her. It was about you. It sounds like she should not have been out yet in public. She needed more time to deal with her loss, especially a wedding. Chances are very high usually that the subject of children is going to come up. Even if you did pre-check that speech, chances are you would be thinking about you since it was your day. I, female 25, have been engaged to my fiancé, male 30, for 5 months now. Ever since I moved in with him, I've been having an issue about him making a mess around the place and not cleaning up afterwards. For example, he'd come home from work, sits on the couch and throws his dirty socks on the coffee table. He'd eat his sandwich while moving around, spreading bread on the floor. He'd make a mess whenever he goes into the kitchen to cook something. I ended up handling everything in the kitchen. He'd constantly lose my stuff, and I'd just give him simple tasks so he won't screw up. 2 days ago, he said he was having his friends over for lunch. He said that those were formal friends that he has a professional relationship with at work, and asked if I could clean up the living room before they show up. Thing is, I had work to do. I told him that I'd do my best to try to get off work 2 hours earlier to clean up, since he'll be bringing them with him from work. Unfortunately, I couldn't leave work early as there were a number of co-workers who didn't show up, so I had to cover more hours and I ended up getting off work at 7. I tried to call him several times, even left him a text, but I got no response. I got home at 7 p.m. I found him playing video games. He gave me an angry stare and said that he brought his friends over and was embarrassed by the mess that I didn't clean up because I thought work was more important than him, and that he had to take them to the restaurant after barely sitting in the filthy living room for 30 minutes, and said that his friends were uncomfortable and he felt embarrassed. I explained that I had to work and that he shouldn't have made a mess then expect me to clean it up, then get angry that I didn't. He argued with me that he counted on me and I let him down and embarrassed him, and that now they'll badmouth him and talk behind his back about how filthy his place was. I yelled at him to stop blaming me and told him that it wasn't my fault my coworkers put more work hours on my timeline. He said that apparently I'm being taken advantage of at work and that I'm happy and okay with it. He said he wanted to stay at a friend's house because the place was filthy and he couldn't stand it. I try to call him to discuss this, but he keeps his line busy and sends me texts saying he's busy. I should mention that whenever I talk to him about doing cleaning himself, he'd say he doesn't know how and that cleaning isn't his thing. Is he your fiancé or your child? Not the a-hole. I just do not understand how he's angry at you for not cleaning the mess he made. Not the a-hole. He can't clean, then he can pay for a cleaner. Don't take on being housemaid, as you'll be it for the rest of your life, including for any pets or kids you have. No one else will help you when they see your own partner refusing to do so. He thinks work is taking advantage? Well, at home, he is taking advantage. I know everyone is dumping on OP's fiancé about not cleaning, but what is most horrifying to me is the emotional blackmail. 1. He waited at home for you to arrive from work just to tell you off for not cleaning up the mess. 2. He has the nerve to suggest it's work that's taking advantage of you. 3. He didn't leave because he couldn't handle a filthy apartment. It has presumably been filthy for 2 days, and he has no issue playing video games in the living room until you arrive home. He left because you were finally sticking up for yourself. Therefore, he wanted to manipulate you into believing that you were somehow wrong or at fault, so he can continue to treat you poorly. 4. He is doubling down on his manipulation by ignoring you every time you reach out, in hopes that you become more desperate to make up. Obviously not the a-hole. If this type of behavior is typical in your relationship, I suggest couples counseling before you finalize any wedding plans.